I've made $2 million in my coaching business. Around 1.5 million of that was with sales calls, and the most recent 500,000 of that has been without sales calls. Now, I made that switch from sales calls to selling without sales calls last year, and there's really 5 key shifts I had to make to actually allow me to make that change. So in this video, I'm going to share what those 5 shifts are, and just kind of give a bit of an insight into how they work, how you need to think. Um, in case you're looking at switching from sales calls to selling without them, I think this video is going to be useful for you. And so the first thing I think is always useful to say with this and kind of sort of to pre-frame this is that selling without sales calls, most people see it as, okay, well, I just take a sales call and I do that in the DMs instead. And that's like the worst way to think about it. That's absolute opposite of what selling without sales calls is all about. Selling without sales calls, being able to close people in the DMs, is all about pre-selling. It's all about getting people pre-sold on working with you before they even have a conversation with you. If you are just simply, you know, not taking sales calls, but you're going back and forth for hours with people in the DMs every day just to convince them to work with you, then it kind of defeats the object of actually getting rid of sales calls in the first place. The whole point is that sales calls for you watching are either taking up hours of your day taking sales calls, or they're taking up hours of your time per week, but more importantly, your energy, your mental space, even anxiety and stress, because you're having to manage a sales team to be taking those calls for you. And so for me, I'm not going to get into the details today of why I made the transition. I do that in other videos, but making that switch from selling with sales calls to without has been one of the best things I've ever done in terms of my business, my life, my health, my mindset, relationships, everything. It's made a massive, massive positive difference to all of those things. Um, but anyway, without any further ado, let's just get into the shifts and kind of explain the ideas behind them. So, um, with these shifts, I've tried to include, because there's more than 5, but I think these are kind of the 5 main ones. And I've tried to include ones that are shifts that I had to make in terms of myself, and also some more tactical shifts when it comes to kind of strategy and kind of tactics. Because it's both, right? It's both. And so number one is, now I aim to attract people based on alignment, not qualification. So what does this mean? Well, when you attract people based on qualification, what do you care about? You care that they have a problem you can solve. You care that they are from a first world country. You care that they have money. You care that they are ready to invest, right? You care that they are the perfect person for you to help in terms of the criteria you're looking for. That's what it means. That's what it means when you're trying to attract people based on qualification. Obviously, that works, but there are many problems that you essentially have with that. And one of the key ideas behind selling without sales calls, or no, I should say, one of the key factors of having success of selling without sales calls is understanding that your business has to make a massive shift in terms of being a sales focused business to being a marketing focused business. And as a result, a lot of your growth and scaling your business is going to come not from the front end sales of the business, but from the back end, the retention, the cross sells, the possible upsells, just essentially a more efficient business and a business that keeps your clients for longer. And so a key component of that is attracting people based on alignment rather than qualification. People who are qualified, yes, they buy, yes, they join the programs, but typically they're the first people to leave. Typically they're the first people to complain. They're the first people that once they learn the system, they get out of there as quick as they can. Typically they're the people that might push their luck in terms of trying to get out of agreements early, not fulfilling their promise to you, and all these other kind of issues that happen when you're purely selling to people based on qualification. You also have a very hard time selling to those people because typically that type of person is window shopping, right? They're not someone who is 100% sold on you. They are someone who is out there looking at different options in the marketplace. They're price shopping, looking for the best deal, looking for the best guarantees. And obviously, it causes many problems then in terms of selling to that person and that sort of the effort it takes just to close a client. And so when you sell to alignment instead, essentially what alignment means is you're trying to focus your marketing around ideas and around values, right? Ideas being your opinions and your ideas around your industry as to how things should be done versus how they shouldn't be done. So for example, um, sales calls versus not sales calls. That's an idea that I have around this industry right now. I used to be very much sales calls only, but obviously that things change right over time. And that's my opinion right now. And it's a big idea that I share in my content. The kind of next layer of that is then values. Now, values doesn't mean you have to start to tell people directly what your values are. But for me, it's, again, the example is because I don't want to be taking sales calls, what's the story behind that? Long story short, it's I want more time for myself, for my family, for hobbies. I'm not here to build an empire and take over the world and change the education industry and all of these kind of other, frankly, quite stupid goals that people say that they have just because someone else said it. I'm here to build what I call creative cash flow, right? And that's just essentially I get paid to do work I love, to work with people I love, and just enjoy it, right? And so for me, there's values behind that. Values in simplicity, values in having a minimal lifestyle, values in um, uh, you know prioritizing family and free time and yourself and your health, as opposed to the opposite value being scale at all costs, maximal growth, maximal sales. And I don't have to tell you that that's my values by simply talking about the ideas. There are values attached to that, right? And so that's number one. It's the biggest shift is setting, trying to track based on qualification versus trying to track based on alignment. Number two is to speak to higher level buyers. Now, high level buyers typically just means there's people who have, they're a bit further ahead in terms of what it is you teach, number one, but also there's someone who has perhaps already purchased programs. They've had the coaches, they've essentially have already got started with what it is you're teaching. And so the key with that is that the beginner, quote unquote, the beginners in your industry, they come preloaded with a lot of problems. Mindset problems typically, lack of certainty, lack of clarity, distrust, right, in terms of you, the industry, and everything else. And so what happens is when you're selling to more of a beginner, there are two sales you have to make to them. Essentially, number one, you have to sell to them the idea of actually doing the thing you're teaching, right, and actually investing in themselves. That's the first sale you have to make. And then the second sale is you have to convince them that you are the person to buy from. And so it becomes very hard, very convoluted to be able to do that. And again, not that these things are impossible. Yes, you're probably doing that right now, or you have done it before. But again, it's just about ease. It's about simplicity. And again, trying to sell to that type of person in the DMs is very difficult because they're the people more likely to ghost. They're the people more likely to not decide, to have objections, to question everything. And again, that's just not, it doesn't work when you're trying to sell it in the DMs. You want people who they've been here before, they've had these conversations, they know what they want essentially, and they come into the conversation in the DMs with you essentially ready to just say, hey, it's my situation. I need this. Do you have that? Yes or no? Yes, great, I'm in. No, okay, I'm out. Right. It's kind of as simple as that. Again, tactics on how you do that, just check out some of my other videos. I do cover that in detail in some of the videos there. Number three is focusing on people who are essentially they're in buy-in mode as opposed to people who are unaware. Again, I've mentioned this a few times on the channel. There is a diagram, the 4 or 5 stages of awareness, right, that people go through when they buy. It's like unaware right the way through to product aware or solution aware, whichever one it is. Again, I don't know, I can't remember the details of it. But the point is that when you're doing sales calls, you typically are getting people, your number one goal with marketing, when you're doing sales calls, the number one goal with marketing is to sell the sales call, right? And it doesn't matter what anyone else has told you about sales call funnel. That's the reality. Is your number one goal with a sales call business and the marketing of that is to sell the sales call. It's not to sell people on working with you. It's to sell people on getting on a call with you. And when you get really good at selling people on to getting on a call with you, you typically then can have quite a big business. But the point here is that when they get onto the call with you, they are people typically that are in more of the unaware kind of phase of their business. They're getting on that call with the idea and intention to essentially just kind of figure out and find out what you have to offer, who you are sometimes, right? And kind of for themselves figure out what is the real problem here? Do I even need this person's help? And so that sales call, a lot of it is spent taking that person from essentially unaware of actually what the real problems are. They have a rough idea, And it's trying to convince them and show them that, hey, look, you think these are the problems. This is actually the real problem. Did you think about this? Have you tried that? And again, it's this whole process to just try to expedite that process from unaware to solution aware, wanting to work with you within a 1 hour sales call. Again, does it work? Yes, it does. These are, trying and tested ways of getting clients, but it's painful, right? Having to do that with someone. Now, can you improve your marketing so you're getting less of those people and more kind of buyer type people on sales calls? Of course you can, but in respect to the topic here of transitioning from sales calls to not sales calls, you cannot sell in the DMs if you are attracting people who are in that unaware, again, earlier stage of awareness of actually what it is you do. You need to attract people who are very much problem aware. They know exactly what their problem is, and they're essentially already looking for a solution, right? So again, now the sale you have to make to them, you're not selling them on having to invest in themselves. You're not even selling them on what the real problem is, although that's partly what it is. You're selling them simply on you being the person who is best placed to help them to solve it. And that, again, is a much easier, much simpler way to sell to someone. And again, when you're in a conversation with that type of person in the DMs, it's like there's no chasing you have to do. There's no convincing you have to do, because again, this person's much more serious. This person is more serious in respect that the camera died, so I had to reset that point. But what I was trying to say is that you need to focus on a high level buyer. Yes, you do, but it's also understanding that someone who is completely unaware of their problems is going to be very difficult to convince them in the DMs of the fact that they have a problem in the first place and that you are the person to buy from. And so you want to, number one, attract people based on alignment rather than qualification. Number two, you want to speak to a high level buyer. So that is someone who has already started a bit further along in their journey, in respect to whatever it is you're teaching. They're kind of a bit more advanced, and they've invested in things before. And then number three is you want to focus on people who are buyers, they're in buy-in mode, as opposed to people who are unaware, right? So you're not trying to attract people who are window shopping and price shopping and they are asking for discounts and guarantees and all of that stuff. You're trying to attract people who they've got a problem, they know what a problem is, they're actively looking for a solution for that problem, and they're looking for a solution to their problem now as opposed to at some point in the future. That's the person you're trying to attract. And again, it's much easier to sell to that person because you don't only have to convince them of one thing, that you are the person to work with, right? As opposed to just anything, as opposed to other things like they have a problem and stuff like that. It's a much easier sale to make. And so moving on to the final 2 points, I'm going to switch around the order because one is a more personal one. The second one is tactical. So I'll do the opposite. So number 4 is creating a reason why now. So the good thing with sales calls is it's very easy to create a reason why someone should take action now. And one of the core kind of killers of any business is not when people say no and reject you, it's when you don't know why they've rejected you, right? So that's like if you're being ghosted or if people give you objections that aren't really the real objections, right? And then they don't really open up. That's what kills a business. It's the lack of understanding on why people aren't moving forward. That's the killer, not the no's themselves. And so with a sales call, it's quite easy to understand and get those reasons, right? Because you build rapport with someone, you build a certain level of trust and understanding. And by the end of that call, typically that person should be quite open with you and be sharing everything. And if it's not right for them, then they will say, look, I just don't think it's right for X, Y, and Z reason. And it's like, great, no worries, go our separate ways. At least then you know and you have an answer. And for me with sales calls, when I was doing them, my number one goal was not to get the client, it was to get a decision, right? A yes or no decision, because that gives me closure on that conversation, right? And then I can figure out what worked, what didn't work, and so on. Now, when you go into the DMs and you're trying to close clients there, it's quite difficult to then get a decision, yes or no, when you send them the offer, right? And really, the only way you do it is by creating an artificial reason why now. Now, artificial doesn't mean it's not backed by a real, by reality. It just means you have to create something out of nothing, right? And so an example of this is doing an open close enrollment period. So for my program, I open and close it every month. I open it for a handful of days, and then for the rest of the month, we're closed. And so if you reach out to me at a certain point in the month, I may not be open for enrollment, and so I could yes, tell you about the program. I can send you all the details. You can say to me, yes, Harry, I'd like to join. But you won't be able to join, right? Because I'm closed for enrollment. So when I then do open enrollment for that 2 or 3 days, you now have a valid reason and valid urgency to actually take action. Or if you reach out to me in that period of time, there's a valid reason and urgency for you to say yes or no. Because if you don't say yes, or if you don't give me a decision, then you're not going to be able to join, right? And so there's a kind of real urgency that we bake into it. Now that's not just one example, it's one way to do it. There are many, many ways to do it. Probably 10, 15, 20 ways to actually create that reason why now. But that's one way, sorry, that I like to do it. One of many. And so that's another shift you have to make is create a reason why now, artificial, real, whatever. You need a reason why now to get that decision in the DMs. Now, the final point is to it's a much personal one. And I think, let me frame this one as well. Going from sales calls to DM selling, a lot of people think it's just simply a strategy change. You just have to change your content, change your messaging, make shifts I've said here, and you change your funnel and whatever else, and suddenly you're off to the races and it's going to be fine. And that will maybe get you part of the way, right? It will get you part of the way. But for you to scale, for you to get it to a very high level, for you to get back to the same level you was at with your sales calls and go beyond that, it becomes much more an inner game than it does an outer game. And essentially, that whole idea here is that you have to become a person who can close in the DMs and can attract the type of people who will buy in the DMs. And so, really, how do you do that? It's you have to change your personal actions, your mindsets, and just how you kind of show up in the world. So I'll try and give you some examples. And a good way to say it is your vibe attracts your tribe, is what a mentor says. It's not the way I'd like to say it, but it is reality. So I'll give you some examples. So let's say that I'm in the DMs and we're having a conversation and you ghost me, right, for whatever reason. Now I will follow up, right? I'll do 1 or 2 follow-ups. Now after that, you're on your own. I'm not going to follow up and chase you any more than that. If I was doing sales calls, best believe I'd be messaging you every couple of hours, 5, 6, 7 times to get a response from you. And I'd be chasing you very much. And obviously that's a strategy change, but there's also a fundamental difference there in terms of the mindset and my belief system, right, and my personality and actually how I show up in that encounter. And my status level in terms of the conversation, how you perceive me as being an authority or not an authority, that all changes based on my actions, myself, and my activities. And so DM selling is about becoming a magnetic person, becoming energetically attractive, right? Is a way to say it. And so you can only pre-sell people when you become energetically attractive, because part of pre-selling is pre-selling people on you as a person, right? And so you can pre-sell people on your ideas, you can pre-sell people on your path and your method and your model and your client wins and proof and all of those important things. But if they're not pre-sold on you, you can't sell them on you in a conversation. It's very, very difficult to do. So you have to pre-sell them in your content, in how you show up on videos like this. And that's just through personality traits. That's just through your vibe and how you show up. And so all the ways that I speak now in these videos, you know, I don't want to kind of describe it, but just in terms of how I might come across to you, and so for some of you might agree, some of you may disagree with what I say. For some of you, you might think Harry's my guy. Some of you might think Harry's not my guy. And a lot of that just comes down to how I come across as a person, as opposed to kind of what it is I'm saying and all those other things. And you can only and that energy, that energetic attractiveness, right? That's not cultivated through strategy. That's cultivated through how you show up in life as a whole, right? And so it's very hard to describe, but it's little details. It's when I have a decision and a choice. Do I spend this next hour of sending outbound DMs, chasing up leads, following up with people, or do I spend the next hour going to the driving range to hit some golf balls, right? Which one does my energetically attractive self do? What it's like, it's the second option. It's I'm going to go and play golf and do what I want to do when I want to do it, because that's the type of business I want to build. That's the type of business I'm teaching people to build. And so me embodying that lifestyle, me showing up as that person is naturally going to put me in a state of being, a state of showing up that naturally attracts that person, right? And it makes it much easier then to document that, to show that, to share that. And I don't have to sit here and say, I am this person, I am this, these are my values. Just simply the way I show up in the world shows that, it demonstrates that. And so it's very, very hard to send in the DMs and attract people to you and pre-sell them on you as a person if energetically you are still in chase mode, you are still in survival mode, you are still trying to, you still have anxiety and stress over the business and all of these other things. And again, that's not strategy, that is lifestyle, that is your habits, that is your actions and your reality, your daily reality, which reflects that, your beliefs, your mindset, your physiology, all of those things that are not something on a screen, something on a piece of paper, they determine massively your ability to attract people to you. And it's why some of you might be watching this and thinking, I'm doing all the right things, but it's still not working. Or it's probably this last one, is that you haven't made that shift yourself energetically to become a person that can attract people in that way. And so I don't want to be too woo-woo about things, but woo-woo sometimes is important with these things. And so, yeah, that's the 5 shifts. I hope that was useful for you. I will do some more videos in the future with some more shifts and more kind of tactical stuff around the subject. But yeah, otherwise, hope it was useful. If you're interested in learning a bit more about sending in the DMs rather than sales calls and scaling your coaching business, I have a video down below this one. It'll be in the comments. Description somewhere. Click on that. That explains a lot more about me, my journey, and kind of my system and how I do things. But if not, appreciate your time. Anyway, look out for the new videos. I upload them every week, give or take.